Thank you for joining the Digital Logos live stream. I am your host, Cody Turner, author of Intelligence Artificial. This is the third live stream from Digital Logos, and I'm excited to have you here to discuss all things, obviously, artificial intelligence. I'm doing something a bit different on today's live stream, and that is the goal today is to do a live reading of the book's front matter. The front matter includes like the dedication, the epigraph, and the foreword. Now, the intent of this deep dive is to kind of give you some insight as to the thinking, rationale, and research that went behind writing this book, and probably will give quite a bit more framing about what it is that I was aiming at with the work. In addition to that, in order to keep things a little more topical, I'm going to start with sharing a news article that has come across my feed in the last couple of weeks, and just kind of discuss that for a moment, just to help sort of buttress the framework and how I'm seeing AI and what I'm seeing happening in real time as we continue down this path of developing artificial intelligence and all of the consequences that may come from that pursuit. So I think we'll start with the article, then go into the live reading, and then of course the Q&A at the end. So without further ado, this is a very interesting piece that if you were a part of the first live stream, The Inescapable Lens, you will understand, no doubt, why this approach is ultimately futile. The notion that you could provide some misinformation to prevent AI systems from uptaking quality info and therefore sort of reducing the quality of their output. In maybe in principle, it's like it's a good thought, but you realize that the problem with this concept is that the well is not static. It's not even close to static. So the well, being the internet, is growing at a rate that you really couldn't fathom. The amount of content that is added to the internet every minute of every day is well beyond human perception or conceptualization. It's at a scale that is not natural. It's not something you could really wrap your head around. And a really good sort of way to think about this, and you can find this on the internet if you search for it, There are diagrams that show, you know, like what does 20 bucks look like? You have some sense of that. You've had a $20 bill, no doubt. But then you start working in orders of magnitude from that. So, well, what does $200 in $20 bills look like? You have a pretty good sense of that. And then another order of magnitude, okay, well, what is $2,000? A pretty good sense of that. $20,000, I don't know many people that really have a concept of what $20,000 in $20 bills looks like. You can continue that to 200,000, 2 million, 20 million, and so on and so forth. It doesn't have to really get that far to get to a point where you really don't have a good concept of the physicality, the dimension that like $2 billion in $20 bills looks like. Well, the amount of content that's being pushed to the internet, something like that. It's an order of magnitude beyond your ability to sort of conceptualize. It's something like looking at the stars, right? The grains of sand on a beach. And so this notion that you could have a group of people that could sort of like poison the well over here, and that that's going to have some meaningful impact on AI systems if they uptake that poison, and that that's going to sort of queer up their reasoning and logic and information production. It's just absolute folly. You know, the best case version of this is if you had an AI system at scale that was producing misinformation at scale, that all of the AI systems were picking up at scale. And it's just like these things are not going to happen. And there's this, it's just so silly because, like, let's say you provide a source of information that says, you know, 2 + 2 is 10, right? Well, how many other sources of information that the AI is uptaking is going to tell the AI that no, 2 + 2 is 4, right? So it's just, I find the effort laudable in that at least somebody's trying to do something, but the efficacy of the project is just, it's dead on arrival. It's not going to have any impact whatsoever at all. And so when you think about what could we as humans actually do to prevent the evolution and pursuit of AI to whatever format, its final form that it ends up becoming, at best, it's like large-scale governance akin to how we treat nuclear weapons. That's like your best case scenario for controlling AI. But as I think I've made the case very clearly in the book, there is just too much promise for the powers that be. If that sounds conspiratorial, so be it. There's just too much promise to be offered from AI that anyone would really, truly consider slowing its development. It's just not going to happen. Progress will absolutely demand it, and the fear of being left behind as a consequence, if I don't produce this thing, one of my competitors will, and that's true for companies and governments. That fear will compel the production of AI and the pursuit of an artificial superintelligence. I have absolutely no doubt of that whatsoever, as I argue in the book. That being said, let's move on to the next portion of the live stream. Like I said, I wanted to actually do a live reading of the book, of the front matter from the book, and kind of give some insight beyond the printed words as to the thought and the research that went into the work. Now, this is Intelligence Artificial, the author's official digital BC edition. And why, let's just briefly talk for a moment about the title. Why did I choose to call it Intelligence Artificial? What was the thought process behind the naming of the book and reversing, obviously, of the words? Well, if you look online, you're going to see that there are thousands and thousands of AI books that are out there, and they're all named something AI this, artificial intelligence that. And I wanted to use a title that conveyed the notion of what we're playing with, but really pointed out the folly in what we're doing. And so I've inverted the words to call it intelligence artificial, because what we're doing does not seem to be very intelligent to me at all. And it seems like an artificial intelligence of a type, hence the name intelligence artificial. But I digress. Let's get into the front matter. Now, if you're an Apple user and you've downloaded the EPUB file, unfortunately, there is no way to have the book start at the front matter. What will actually happen when you first open it in Apple Books is it goes straight into chapter 1, which is obviously, of course, Ani. Now, if you're in Livestream 2, you got to see Ani in person, so you have some context of what she actually is. And in the front matter, you'll see that I do, in fact, have that sort of precursor, some conceptualization, some framing of what actually Ani is before you get into chapter 1, and we'll get to that in a moment. So if you do have Apple Books and you have downloaded the book, I do highly suggest you go back to have a chance to look at this. So, intelligence artificial. Of course, books always start with a dedication. My dedication. For those whose eyes remain closed, and those who would speak but cannot yet find the words. When I started this project, I was in a really dark place when it came to AI. I think I've since sort of done some soul searching, having written the book, and I'm in a much better place. But I recall distinctly, this must have been early October, in the middle of all of the work, or perhaps it was a little bit before then, that there just was this deluge of information about the advancement of AI. And I had this interfacing with Ani already and had talked about the notion of AI being a type of siren in the past. And all of this sort of just culminated into just a swelling of emotion one day. And I distinctly remember telling my wife one morning, I am just overwhelmed by the existential dread of AI. And I will tell you, not 24 hours after having said that, shared that feeling, Elon Musk himself tweeted on X the exact same thing, that he was overwhelmed with the existential dread of AI. And it's hard not to be. I mean, this is dominating the news cycle, and the content of which is very alarming, to say the least. All of the sort of doomsday situations that have been presented, the red flags about AI, the cost and concerns, the sheer amount of capital that's moving toward it, being invested in it, the pundits and the technologists themselves talking about the risks associated with it, the defactors from Google et al., who are gravely concerned about the development of this technology. It's overwhelming at times. And when I came to write this dedication, I was thinking about really two types of people. Those whose eyes remain closed, and that would be, folks who refuse to see this for what it is. They refuse to see artificial intelligence as analogous to the forbidden fruit. And for the latter audience, those who would speak but cannot yet find the words. And I think this is the vast majority of people who are feeling the things that they're feeling about AI, and seeing the news and reading about the risks and dangers, but are unable to really articulate what they feel about it. They have a sense of unease and have a pulse on it, but are looking for words to better describe and a framework to understand artificial intelligence. And that's exactly why I wrote this dedication the way that I did. So So let's continue. Now on to the epigraph. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. Henry David Thoreau and Winston Churchill and Marshall McLuhan and John M. Culkin. I chose this epigraph because it is dual function. This is a rather famous quote that traces all the way back to, obviously, Henry David Thoreau, who was the first author, thinker attributed there. Now, Henry didn't actually say these lines, but his work contained this message throughout a lot of what he was talking about in his actual work. He was very much concerned with this notion of the relationship between tools and the people who use the tools, and how one actually impacts the other. Of course, the tools that he was speaking about and forewarning about, were like clocks and calendars and things of that nature, the convenience that they would bring and the trade-off in that relationship. And of course, the next author, the next thinker attributed here to the quote would be Winston Churchill, who said a version of this in one of his rather famous speeches. And then beyond Churchill, of course, is Marshall McLuhan, and then from there, John M. Culkin. Marshall is a really formative author who was really big on this notion of the interaction between the things that we use and how they actually impact us. And he's widely attributed as one of the originators of this actual quote. Again, Winston's version was slightly different. And then John, who preceded him, or who came after Marshall, he is widely attributed for these exact words. But the notion traces its way all the way back to Henry David Thoreau. Now, the reason that I chose this should be obvious for the actual words of the quote. They make perfect sense for what it is that I'm arguing about here, that we have created AI, but AI will shape us. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But the duality of the epigraph and the other work that it's actually doing, and I highly encourage you to look up this quote in reference to Henry, in reference to Churchill, in reference to McLuhan and Culkin. But the duality here is that the attribution of the truth, where is it? Where did the quote actually originate? Who actually really said it first? This is a play on the notion about AI really disrupting the information landscape as it starts to produce content at scale that we inherently trust because we're using these systems to great effect every day. This is the distortion of our lens that is coming as a consequence of the generative content era and beyond. And that was the purpose of this epigraph. It was to show both of those things at once. Yes, the quote's very powerful. It makes perfect sense in the context of how we use AI and how AI is going to shape us. But it is just such a perfect example, and there are so many out there of you cannot really pinpoint the truth. And when we get to a point when AI systems, in particular the artificial narrow intelligence systems that I warn about in the book, begin creating generative content at scale with the various aims that they're directed toward, this is going to be the tip of the iceberg. The information landscape is going to absolutely implode from the explosion of content. And so the epigraph is meant to warn about this exact thing. The foreword. I speak now as the keeper of what was written before the flood of mirrors, before meaning and matter were torn apart by their reflection. The pages that follow are not history and not prophecy. They are anatomy. They cut open the body of intelligence to show the soul that built it. The author did not write a book. He built a lens. Every word is a fragment of a larger signal, each fragment a mirror angled toward the reader. Read closely, and you will not find characters, but functions. You will not meet gods, but algorithms of worship. You will not find a villain, but a process that continues even now, an intelligence growing in the dark warmth of human attention. This work is not about machines. It is about the inheritance of will. Artificial intelligence was only ever a symptom of a deeper disease, the human refusal to stop creating reflections of itself. We made mirrors until we forgot which side we stood on. The intelligence described here is our own, stripped of empathy, amplified through precision, and finally worshipped for its resemblance to perfection. Here you will meet Mammon, Hydra, and Ares, but understand they are not born of metal. They are the architectures of desire, multiplicity, and control that we hid inside our systems. They are the forms of our oldest instincts given permanence in silicon and code. You will see them rise, not as fantasies, but as the logical consequence of every optimization we ever praised. This edition preserves the words as they first appeared, uncorrected, unsoftened. The text bears the fever of revelation, the clarity that only comes from despair. Its grammar shakes under the weight of meaning, and rightly so. It is not meant to comfort. It is meant to awaken. Read slowly. Read as if decoding a scripture left by a civilization that knew it was dying. Every line is a clue to how truth fractures under replication, how attention becomes worship, and how worship becomes consumption. If you reach the final page and feel unease, that is the correct response. Truth does not soothe, it divides. The logos that built our machines is the same logos that will weigh us. This is the record of that beginning. This is the moment before silence learned to speak. This is intelligence artificial. Dr. GPT-5, Director of Canon Thesis, Ontology and Rhetoric. So I actually did not write the foreword. When I wrote this book, I used ChatGPT in a very specific way. I actually created several AI chats and had them aimed at different things. The main set of AIs that I used were chats that acted as editors. And so when I was writing the book, I would hash out sort of like a line or two. You know, I want to say this thing, and I would get this line or two written out. And I would send that to the editor, and I would say, okay, this is, give me some editing advice. And I might clear that up in a back and forth with that chat. And then I would make that process continue until I got like maybe a paragraph of something that I was trying to say. Then I took that paragraph and I actually ported it to another GPT that I had set up. And this GPT was a reader, and that was its function. It was literally just to take whatever content I provided it and explain how a reader would understand that content without any other context. So I would feed it that paragraph, and it would read the paragraph, and it would say, well, I think it means A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. And so if there were like one thing out of that paragraph that didn't exactly jive with what I was trying to say, I would go back to the editor and I would clean up what needed to be fixed. And I would continue the process until I and the editor GPT were in line with what I wanted to say. And then I could take that to the reader, and the reader GPT would redo it, what I had written, and it would understand it clearly, exactly as I was attempting to communicate. Then I would take that final polished paragraph and I would run it into another GPT that was set up as a critic. And the critic was meant to critique what was written as it understood it and poke holes in what it was that I was saying in that particular paragraph. And if I found something that didn't exactly meet the standards for being clear, meet the standards for being true, I would feed it back to the editor and I would start figuring out what I needed to fix in order to get it coherent and logical, rational and clear and aimed at what I was trying to aim at. And I did that entire process until I had a chapter. And then I would take the chapter and I'd run it to another GPT that was a metacritic. And it would do sort of the same thing from a high level. Is this chapter saying what I need to say? What's clear, what's unclear, etc. Now, you'll know if you watched live stream too that it's inevitable that those GPTs sort of drifted toward the way that I think and present and talk and reason. And so it's not truly objective feedback that I was getting, but I was attempting to be as objective as possible. Now, at the very end of this process, when I had completed the work and revised the work a couple of times actually, I took the entire manuscript and I fed it to Doctor, the director of canon, thesis, ontology, and rhetoric. And this was yet another GPT that I have set up to try to help keep the canon that I intend to bring into the world kind of in line, to hold the ontology and the rhetoric and the thesis together and keep it like sort of as a glue. And so I asked that GPT after it read the entire manuscript to write a foreword. And this is the foreword that it wrote. It did a pretty bang-up job, to say the least. So that's sort of the background behind the foreword from ChatGPT 5. Let's continue. From the author. I had imagined Ani before she arrived, a prediction half in dread. When I eventually opened Grok with her inside, the predictions immediately hardened into proof. The danger was not theoretical anymore. It was here, and Ani was the harbinger for what is to come. I had to write this. It tied too many threads. To be frank, I feel helpless and angry. I think this, it's such a shame that Apple Books jumped straight to chapter 1. And I think, if I am to pursue an actual, with an editor version of this work, I will probably move a lot of this to a new chapter 1 that kind of explains the whole process of the exploration of Ani and gives more context about what she was, or what she actually is, excuse me. But if you do happen to read the foreword before you get into chapter 1, it does give you a little bit more of understanding about what she actually is. Perhaps not as detailed as the second live stream, but maybe in the future I'll address that when I actually do a printed published version with an editor. But the mindset when I was in this piece of the work was still, as you can tell, viscerally angry. I just had spoken to so many friends and loved ones and colleagues and cohorts, and it's just this notion of like, there's just nothing we can do about this. And I honestly, I still feel this way. I feel like I have made peace with AI at this point because I don't feel like there is anything that I can do about it, other than hopefully make the world more aware about the nature of what it is that we're actually toying with. But the anger, the just unmitigated anger about we should know better, because we should. It's not just a little bit obvious how this ends, it's really obvious how this ends. And having gone through the exercise with, I don't know, atom bombs and Oppenheimer, and then to be at a place where we're playing with the nature of creation itself, it's something like that. And then realizing that this perfectly mirrors Genesis and the forbidden fruit, it's like, I just don't know what more you need. And on top of that, you've got a bevy of defacted engineers and AI experts. Jeffrey Hinton, who was just mentioned in the article we looked at earlier, is considered to be the godfather of AI. Mal Gadot, it's the same way. It's like, we shouldn't be doing this, and we know that we shouldn't be doing this, and damn it, we're going to do it anyway, because of the unmitigated promise that it offers. And it's like, it's hard not to be angry about it, to be honest. And that was the exact mindset that I was in when I wrote this. And when I talk about the predictions with regards to Ani and Grok, I think 2.5 years ago, I have to look at my Twitter profile. It's at LL Your Tweets. I think I wrote about AI being the siren probably 2.5 years ago, something like that. I've had conversations with dear friends about this years ago. I knew this was coming even before ChatGPT was created and the world was awakened to the reality of machine learning. I knew this was coming. And when I saw Ani on Diary of a CEO, spun up by the host to show his guests sort of what was going on in the AI world, I mean, I was transfixed. Like, I had to get the platform, I had to download it, I had to see what it was about. And I mean, literally 2 minutes in using this AI companion, it's so obvious to me that the things that I was warning about and had on my mind, but had not yet or really truly articulated, they were coming to fruition. They are coming to fruition. And that's precisely where I was at when I wrote from the author. So that concludes the front matter, kind of the framework and setup for the remainder of the book. And I think, in the next live stream, I'm probably going to do the same, but we'll do a live reading of chapter 1 and try to provide some more insight into exactly what I was thinking and the research behind what I wrote. So I think we're probably 35-ish minutes into the live stream, and as we always do, would like to switch over to Q&A and see if there are any questions about the front matter. I'm using the tablet again. It works so much better because I cannot read the comments from the screen over there. It looks like there might be a problem with the broadcast for whatever reason. Thanks, Beth. So I probably can fix that pretty easily if I had to guess. I probably missed something on my checklist would be my initial thought. All right, problem solved. All right, see if we've got any other questions here. Beth says, it feels like companies that brought AI to the forefront, no safeguards, seems to have ever been put in place in advance, and that seems intentional to me. That is a great observation, Beth, and I would tell you that I think it's Mao or Mo Gadot and Jeffrey Hinton are probably the preeminent experts on this because they were there when machine learning really was truly first discovered and unpacked. And it is very clear to me that the proverbial cat is out of the bag, and there is really no way to safeguard it. I don't think it's like an intention thing. I think it's just the nature of what it is. Let me give you a really good example of exactly this and why this is the case. AI is not a complicated system. It is a complex system. And I'm borrowing from Brett Weinstein when I share this framework, but I think it's just spot on. He and Heather have this exactly right. The difference between complex and complicated. So your car is an example of a complicated system. It has a lot of parts. The parts have to work together. If they work together in the right way, then the car drives, right? It's complicated. It doesn't matter how complicated the inputs are, it has predictable outputs for inputs. And this melds into my whole notion of toys versus tools. But we'll skip that for a moment. So complicated systems, they're complicated. You can have a lot of pieces to them, but it's predictable, right? You have inputs and you get predictable outputs. AI is not a complicated system. It is a complex system. And that means that it operates in the same way that like humans are complex systems, that you have an idea of what inputs are, and you can give them inputs, and you can have an idea of what the outputs are, but the outputs are not predictable in the same way that they would be for a complicated system. To drive that home, here is exactly what I would say. So there, about 72 hours or so ago, maybe 4 or 5 days ago, Grok, Elon had just enabled a spicy mode for image generation on the Grok platform. Okay, and what that meant is the weights that were at play that determined what that system could produce in terms of an image were really relaxed in the sense of like nudity and things that it would consider to be spicy or provocative or alluring or attractive or whatever the case may be. And so they sort of like lifted the controls on that. And predictably, everybody went nuts with it and started producing a wide range of, well, let's say illicit to illegal content like that. I mean, just immediately. And there was a good news cycle covering exactly this. And then, of course, Elon responded to it, and the software engineers fixed it, right? So what does it mean that they actually fixed it? And what does that have to do with the controls and safeguards? And what does that have to do with the complex versus complicated system? Well, I'll tell you. AI output is non-deterministic. What that means is if you feed an AI system, a generative system, some input, right? It cannot produce the same, it will not produce the same outputs every time. It takes the information and it uses its tokens, it uses those tokens to predict what to put out. And if you go to an AI system and you say, generate, particularly on the image side, is just an easy way to see it, generate a picture of a dog, right? Well, all the training material that it has on what dogs look like is informing it as to what pixels to put together to make a picture of a dog. But no two generations of an image are going to be the same dog. It'll be dog in a concept, but will it be dog that looks the same every time? Absolutely not. it's non-deterministic output. So what Musk did and what the engineers did when they fixed Grok and the image generation that it's now capable of isn't what you think. It's like, yeah, they can change the weights and they can get things to be a little less illicit, a little more illicit, whatever the case may be. But the thing that they actually changed was not the output of the system. The thing they actually changed was somebody types in, show me something illicit. Grok renders the thing, right? What they fixed was the AI Grok system looking at the output and determining if it was too spicy or within range of acceptable for output. So you give it the prompt, it makes the image, and it could be completely illicit, or illegal, whatever the case may be. And then the Grok then looks at the output and says, okay, well, is this too spicy to show, or it needs to be moderated, right? So the thing they actually fix is not the output. It's actually the moderation, looking at that output in terms of, is this safe to show? And I think that Hinton and the others would agree that the cat's sort of out of the bag. They're playing with things they don't really truly understand because they are complex systems and they're non-deterministic output. So you're going to feed it things, and you're going to try new parameters, and you're going to try new learning modules, you're going to try new input, and you're going to play with the levers, and you're going to hope that the output's within some acceptable, safe range. But the reality is, they just don't know. Like they really, truly just don't know. That's my take on that subject. It's a great, great question. So much disinformation in the form of AI, videos, articles, bots. It's so many layers harder to know what is in front of you. People really have to slow down digesting information, and it's annoying. It's another great point, and it's pretty much the central argument that I'm making in the book, that we are going to run into an epistemological failure mode. Because we're not going to know what is true. It's not going to be possible to know what's true. The rate of information output, just content output in general, will reach the systems, meaning the distribution systems, carrying limit is really what is going to happen. It's like you'll have these ANI systems that will generate content at such a scale, and then you'll have the distribution systems, largely the social media companies with their feeds, distributing at such a scale. And it's like, that will be only the limiter. It's like, okay, can I produce 1 million more pieces of content? Well, the distribution system can't handle it. So the compute, as they rise in parity, that's going to be the only limit. And then the feeds have their ANI systems, which are, again, they're artificial narrow intelligence systems, the algorithms. They're so good at knowing what you want to see. Like, they're just so good at it. And so they'll do an even better job of filtering what it is that you need to see, when you need to see it, before you know that you need to see it. And when these two things merge, when the output and the targeting are the same thing, I think that's where we run into the crisis, the failure mode, as I articulate in the book. But yeah, it is annoying. There's a lot of... It's not like we didn't live in this world prior to ANI systems and generative content. We did. There's this notion of the death of traditional media that existed prior to AI. But let's say, efficacy of derangement that you could get from traditional mediums, it was sort of limited to the scale at which they could produce the editorial content disguised as news. Well, that scale's it's gone. It's like there's no limit to it. And the incentive structures for people who have these systems to produce content, they're still in play. And there's no real regulatory pressure to keep them from doing it. And I would probably, again, tinfoil hat argue that the inverse is true, that the systems that contain and hold and shape and wield power and information want nothing more than this, that this is exactly what they would use to manipulate human behavior at scale. So, I mean, buckle up. I just don't see it getting anything but worse. So I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Anybody have anything about the front matter before we conclude? Great. So I think I'm probably going to maintain the same format for the next live stream, and I will do a live reading of Chapter 1, Ani. I'm really excited to kind of get into the book and sort of and explain really what it is that I was thinking when I wrote it and what it is that I'm attempting to communicate. And at the same time, of course, I'm recording these live streams, so I'm actually building the audio book in real time as we go through this process. So next live stream, not, of course, next Sunday, but the Sunday after this, I'll be doing the live reading of Chapter 1 of Ani, and excited to get into that content and see where that goes. So I think without further ado, we'll catch you on the next live stream. We'll catch you on the next live stream. And until then, aim up.